All right, and we are back. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the OS module. We're continuing on our series here. We've talked about a crash course on classes, and we've talked about the pathlib module. All of these things so far are to help us work with files in Python, and the OS module is no exception. The OS module is super helpful for working with files in Python. And there's a few things that we're going to do. Actually, a lot of the things that are in pathlib are also in the OS module. Some of the same things you're able to do in pathlib you could do in OS. Pathlib is just a nicer way to do it. It's a little less code to write out, but there's a few features that we want to look at. Now, the OS module stands for operating system. It's the operating system module. And again, this is a module that comes with the standard library in Python. That means that we don't have to install this one either, which is super awesome. You'll love to see when these very useful modules are included right out of the box. So the pathlib module provides a object-oriented interface. Now, in the past few videos, we've been talking about classes and creating an instance of a class. And an instance of a class is an object, right? I was kind of trying to introduce those words to you in the last video. But the idea is when you create an instance of a class, that instance is an object. And objects are basically just complex variables, you could say. They're variables that don't just hold one value, they kind of have a little bit more power, right? You can call functions on them, you can do things with them a little bit more than you could with maybe a variable if it just held the number 20. And it's like, well, it's the number 20, but I can't do anything with it. And that's what pathlib does. You're able to have these objects that represent paths and do things like call make directory, like mkdir, make dir, that's a way to read it. And you can call these functions, these methods, on the object. And so it's an object-oriented interface for the file system. Now, the OS module offers a more procedural interface. That means that you're basically just using the OS module to do things. It's not really about creating an object and then doing things on that object. So, for example, we have OS, right? We didn't create an object. We just literally import OS, and then from OS, we call the chdir. And that stands for change directory. And remember, directory is just a folder. It's a holdover from an older time, but directory means folder. So we're changing our current working directory to a different folder. That's useful, right? Because then I can check, I can use that glob function that we looked at in the last video and search with the glob instance method to see what files might be in a new folder. And if I'm moving around, I can kind of do that in place. So sometimes you need to move to a new directory. And when you need to, you use os.chdir, os change directory. In this case, what we would be doing is changing wherever we are. It doesn't matter. We could be anywhere on the file system. Anywhere in the folders, right, on your machine. And we can change to this users student downloads folder using chdir. Another thing we can do is listdir. Now this is very similar to glob, right? But you don't get that powerful ability to list out only certain files based on maybe how they end or words they include. But if you just want to see everything that's in a directory, you can just use os.listdir for list directory. If you're familiar with Mac or Linux, that would be an ls command, and that will list out all of the different files and folders that are present. Now, something that I wanted to point out, um, now this actually isn't a raw string, but I wanted to show you because it creates an error and I didn't want it to have an error without showing you. So let's say I create a raw string here. Now notice it's still an error. That's weird, right? I thought that if we did a raw string, we didn't have to escape our escape character. Well, this is an edge case because what's happening is the backslash is escaping our last quote. So unfortunately, when your string ends in a backslash, you always have to escape that last backslash. And in this case, because it's a raw string, now we're good. Now, even if it's not a raw string, actually, because we escaped it, we're fine. But if your string ends in a backslash, you got to make sure that you escape that last backslash. You can't really avoid it. You have to. Otherwise, your backslash escapes the quote. So, something to point out. Another thing you have is OS makeDirs. Now, this is very useful. So, in the pathlib module, you have the mkdir instance method, right? And you can define a path, and if the last folder described in that path isn't present, you can create it with the instance method mkdir, right? That's what we looked at. Now the OS module has mkdirs, makeDirs, make directories, and it does something way more powerful. So if I define a path that has multiple folders listed in it, and some of those folders don't exist, it will create all of them, which is really helpful. And to illustrate that, below I've written code that shows you just how helpful it is. So if I write out os.makeDirs and I define some path, like makeDirs/is/super helpful, each one of these would be a folder. makeDirs, is, super, helpful would all be folders. It'd be like, the is folder is inside makeDirs, the super folder is inside the is folder, helpful is inside the super folder. It'll create all those in one go. Now, if you wanted to do the same thing with the path class, you would have to actually call that 4 times. So you can see how that might be helpful depending on what you're trying to do. So keep that one in your back pocket. Now, the next ones we're looking at are more dangerous. So be careful with playing with this. Make sure that you're explicit in what you're trying to do, and be super careful before you write a program that generates file paths and then tries to delete them. You really want to test maybe printing what you're planning to delete before you actually run code like this, because you could end up deleting stuff you didn't mean to. And when you delete it, it's gone forever. It doesn't go to the trash bin. Now, if you're interested in learning about how to send a file to the trash bin, there is a section on that in Automate the Boring Stuff. I'm not going to cover it because I don't want to. But if you want to learn about that, feel free. I prefer to actually delete things for good. I don't want to send them to the trash. When I delete something, I want to know that it's actually gone. That being said, proceed with caution when you're deleting things. So os.unlinkPath will delete the file. Unlink, if you think about it, behind the scenes, all it's doing is removing the pointer that tells the operating system where that file is. Technically, the file still exists on your hard drive. You just can't access it through the operating system anymore. You could access it through file recovery software. You actually have to overwrite the memory space on your hard drive where that file was stored before the file's actually gone. So that's why it says unlink. But for all intents and purposes, os.unlink will delete your file. Now, if you want to remove a directory, you can use the os.rmdir, remove directory, remove folder. It will delete a folder that you specify. However, that folder has to be empty. So you have to go through and unlink all the files in a folder, and then you could delete the folder. Pretty cool. And that covers all the most useful things that I wanted to show you in the OS module. In the next video, we're going to actually look at reading and writing files in Python. This part is super useful, and I really look forward to showing you that. So I'll see you in the next video.